So I saw the TV Glow was directed by Jane Schoenbrunn and it stars Justice Smith and Brigette Lundy-Paine. And it takes place in the 1990s and it's about these two people who begin a friendship because they bond over a TV show. However, their lives begin unraveling in ways they didn't expect when that TV show was mysteriously canceled. So this is a movie that I've been hearing a little bit about for a while now. I was definitely intrigued because A24 is releasing this. A24 is one of those studios that is usually releasing out there movies that hardly anyone else will want to make. I'm always intrigued whenever A24 releases a movie. And the trailers themselves looked okay. The reviews themselves were pretty interesting because, like, at first it seemed like they were mostly positive reviews, but since the movie has gone wide a little bit, the movie has gotten more of a mixed reaction. And I kind of am more intrigued when a movie kind of has a divisive reaction. I kind of want to see what the movie's like, see if I usually like them. I usually kind of gravitate towards movies that are divisive in some way. Last year, Beau Was Afraid was one of those. And that movie I really enjoyed for the most part. I thought it was very interesting and such. Definitely some problems, but I was intrigued enough to put it on my top 10 of the year list last year. So this is gonna. I don't know if this movie's going to be on that list for this year, but I was definitely very intrigued by this movie. I definitely think there's a lot of things that I'm thinking about since I saw the movie yesterday. I do think there's a lot of things that really work in this movie. So let's start with the things I do like. First off, I do think the actors do a fantastic job, particularly the two leads, Justice Smith and Brigette Lundy-Paine. I thought their performances were really well done. I believe their chemistry. Justice Smith, who I never didn't like him in Jurassic World. I didn't care for him in Detective Pikachu. This I thought was his best performance. I thought he was pretty good in Dungeons and Dragons too, but I think this is his best performance. He has to be a lot more restrained than he normally is, and I do find his character very fascinating because, like, I kind of related to some of the things, mainly kind of the whole being introverted and kind of feeling like kind of being obsessed with various things, obviously being a very obsessed with movies and such, but I definitely found his character to be very fascinating, and it was like I definitely kind of see like why people talk about Justice Smith a lot. It's like I thought he did a really good job. Brigette Lundy-Paine, I thought she was really good as well. I thought her character was very fascinating. I thought she did a really good job with a lot of dialogue too that she was given, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. It is one of the most gorgeous movies I've seen in a while. The cinematography, which is mostly like neon colors and such, that was an interesting choice, but I do think the movie kind of worked because like kind of shows like, oh, it kind of like how they kind of like show this, show the world of the TV show and such. Is like, okay, that's very fascinating as well. Because like when you kind of see the TV show, it looks like it's something that's literally pulled from like a 90s Nickelodeon show. It's very fascinating. The music is also really well done. Not just the score by Alex G, but also the soundtrack as well. I kind of want to listen to the soundtrack again because like it's strangely, it feels peaceful, but also you kind of know there's like something hidden underneath there. It's like, that's very fascinating. It's like, that's kind of weird. It's definitely out there. It's definitely kind of one of those movies where a lot of people are, I feel like a lot of people are not going to like this movie because it's just too weird and just definitely not mainstream and there's not a lot of answers. But I do think that's very fascinating. Also, I do think this movie may be intentionally cheesy. Like, admittedly, a lot of stuff from the 90s is a little cheesy. I feel like if we look back through it now, a lot of it is not going to look great. And I do think the movie kind of balances that pretty well, especially with the TV show they're watching. Like, at one point, there's, like, costumes that look very well done, very, very well realized and such. Other times, it doesn't look particularly good. It's like, that's kind of weird. It's like, why would you have these costumes here that look really well done, but also these visuals that look pretty bad? Again, 90s, so it's kind of like that. And also, I've been thinking a lot about some of the themes of this movie, which were very fascinating. Like, the power of nostalgia. Like, is our nostalgia strong enough to the point where it's like, are we going to look through it with different eyes years later and just say it's still great and such? Or are we going to look at things differently from years now? It's kind of a weird movie. Like, I think the power of nostalgia is very there. Definitely does feel like a strangely nostalgic movie, even though this movie just came out this year. Also, something that I really thought about this movie were, again, kind of personal, is pain worth living is like, that's what you know. I guess what I mean by that is like, if you're kind of used to something where it's like kind of used to like kind of being yourself down, it's like, is like that worth it? Like, you don't take risks or anything like that. You don't step out of your comfort zone and such. Is it worth like just living in your own bubble if that's what you know? I do think this movie kind of like asks a lot of questions, doesn't have a whole lot of answers, and kind of lets you think about it for a bit. And I do think the movie does a pretty good job of like showing that. Let's talk about the things I don't like about this movie though. There's some things about like the TV show itself where I'm like, that's kind of weird. It's like, why would you have this in the show but not kind of like I'm trying not to spoil this movie because it's kind of hard not to spoil this movie, but it kind of shows like the deeper connections between like the show and the world that they're living in. It's like, why would you not really show like that that deep of a connection? Like, I feel like the show itself is not really in the movie that much. I feel like they could have showed a little bit more of the show itself. Maybe kind of like explore like the impact of the show on the main characters a little bit more rather than like, oh, they just like it. Also, there's so many questions about like, again, I'm trying not to spoil this movie because I kind of want people to check this out without knowing anything. Um, but there are so many questions about the show itself and like how it actually is in the world and like how like people recognize it and such. But then like as the movie goes on, you have so many more questions about it and like the world and such. And I'm like, huh, that's kind of weird. Like why would you let that happen? And I don't understand it. Also, some actors I think are incredibly well wasted, like incredibly wasted. Like Danielle Deadwyler, who I thought was phenomenal until her character is very, she's not in the movie very much. Her character disappears after the first half hour of this movie, and it's like that was kind of a waste. It's like Danielle Deadwyler's a great actress. Like, why would you have her in this movie for a little bit? And her character doesn't do much, unfortunately. Also, there's a lot of unrealistic dialogue in this movie. Sometimes characters say things where you're like, huh, like no regular person would say that. And like at one point they kind of just like talk about like how they used to watch the show, and they literally say how we used to watch the show from 10:30 to 11 at night. It's like oddly specific, but okay. Like, why would you mention it like that? All right, but I'm not gonna deny that this movie has, I won't say it left an impact on me, but I'm still kind of thinking about it 24 hours after watching it. I do think the acting is incredible. I do think the cinematography is great. The music itself is really well done as well. The themes are pretty interesting. I do kind of like I kind of like that it does feel nostalgic, even though it's not really nostalgic at the same time. I do think that the show itself is pretty interesting as well. But I feel like that show could have been shown a little bit more, but there's also so many plot holes that you could probably drive a truck through. And also, some actors are kind of wasted, and some of the dialogue is really ridiculous. But I do think this is a movie that is worth checking out, especially like some of the themes that kind of just come out of it. I know that a lot of people may not like this movie because like there's not a lot of answers. It kind of like leaves you thinking about a lot of things, but like, and there's like so many things where it's like, again, some of the things I mentioned, like some of the stuff can be incredibly cheesy and such. But if you're willing to like give something very out there and something weird a chance, I think this movie is just weird enough to kind of like recommend to people. I saw the TV Glow 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, is there a show that you're very nostalgic for, a movie that you're nostalgic for, even though it may not be the best thing ever? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.